morning. Neil from Magpie Brewing. So today I thought I'd do something different in this never-ending quest most home brewers have to save money. I thought I'd give you a look around the brew room, what I use, how I use it, and where I get it from. And I will state that I mostly do all grain, so this will certainly pertain more to people that do all grain, the majority of it, and then we'll go through doing the grain, milling the grain, what I use, what vessels I use to do the brews, get the wort, then how I get the wort out, etc, etc. So we'll go through the process. I will put a disclaimer in very early because I will name products and businesses in this video, and I buy everything that I use. I don't get any support other than the normal customer support off any business that I buy stuff from. And the reason that I say this is because after viewing the video you're going to realise that I probably use one company more than any other, and it's no different in my opinion to somebody, Ford, Holden, Toyota. You find a vehicle that you like and you trust, and a product that you like and you trust, and people that are easy to deal with, and you continue to deal with them. I mean, that's how business works. That's how you get continued business, by looking after your customers. So the various businesses that I do use, I will name, and people may or may not use them, but you're welcome to any opinion you have on that matter. But I will reiterate that I do buy my products. Any review I do is purely impartial because it's a product that I bought, so I'm not going to give people a bum steer on things. So we'll go through the process. So first off, I suppose, is water. I live in Taree of New South Wales, on the east coast of New South Wales. Water's not too bad here, but I use RO water. I've got an RO unit. It's not an expensive unit, but I use the RO purely because that gives me a way to start from scratch, and I'll put my own salts in. So the RO unit I have is, so that's my RO unit. It's unbranded. Originally purchased off eBay as a 5-stage RO unit. So when I received it from eBay, the seller on eBay, I was getting 40 litres of water in 30 minutes, and I thought something's wrong. So I contacted the seller, and I must admit I didn't get a lot of satisfaction from it, but the one satisfaction I got was, I think I paid $89 for the 5-stage RO unit. The one thing that I did get satisfaction from was I was then told it's not really a true RO reverse osmosis unit, that it was an ultra filter. So okay, I thought, okay, well that's not really what I want. So I went to Water Filters Australia, and from Water Filters Australia I bought the top 2 units. One is a 50 gallon per day reverse osmosis water, which is this unit, and the other one is a neutralising filter, which actually gives me 0 TDS after it passes through. I bought a restrictor, a flow constrictor, and I'm very happy with the unit now as it's set up. I do get 0 TDS. I live near a rail line there, so we've got a train going past. So I get 0 TDS, and also from the same company I bought a TDS meter, and the unit I bought through their recommendation at Water Filters Australia is an HM brand, and it's a TDS-3 is the model. And about every month I test the water. I brew fairly regularly, so I test every month, and I'm 6 months, 7 months in now of having this unit, and I'm still getting 0 TDS, so quite happy with it. So to continue on, most of the salts I use are pretty basic, so I quite often use sodium bicarbonate, and then that was just a supermarket. And then from the Brewman I bought some calcium chloride, and also from Brewman gypsum. And I also use Epsom salts and just normal, well, I use pink Himalayan salt, but normal table salt will suffice. And to weigh those out, I bought a scale. It's an AMI scale. It does points of an ounce, so 1.2, 1.4, 1.5, so it does all graduations. That was bought from Amazon, wasn't real dear, and it does a very good job. I also use it to weigh my hops out. And then the other ingredient I use, of course, is lactic acid. It's 88% food grade lactic acid and purchased from Brewman. And that's purely to get my pH to where I want it. I normally brew between 5.3 and 5.6 for the pH, and I put all these measurements through my software program. I use Brewer's Friend. There's others out there. The two popular ones are Beersmith and also Brewfather, I think it's called. But I've been using Brewer's Friend now for quite some time, so I subscribe. Okay, these are some measuring tools that I use. So the first one, again from Water Systems Australia, Water Filters Australia, is my pH meter. Again, it's a HM brand and it's very accurate. Next to that is my hydrometer. Just a normal hydrometer, nothing special. There's an ad about that at the present time, nothing special. But anyway, it's just a normal hydrometer used at the end of the brews. Sometimes mid-brew if I think my refractometer is giving me a funny reading. And my refractometer, again, is just a basic refractometer. I think between the refractometer and the hydrometer I get a pretty good reading about where my brew's at. And that refractometer, of course, is a Keg King refractometer. And I got that as part of a kit when I bought a 60 litre snubby nose fermenter. And then one of the most other really important tools is my glass thermometer. So after the water, of course, we need grain. My base malt grains I buy in the bag, and there's a Wyman Pilsner which I use quite often, German malt, and they also make a very good pale ale malt. Most of my malt again is purchased from Steve at the Brewing and stored in 35 litre containers. You can see them in the background. I buy them from Bunnings. I have a few of them. So the only grain that I don't really buy from Steve at the Brewman is when I only want to use a single grain in a beer, I purchase an Australian grain. It's Voyager Valoria Schooner. Honestly, for pale ales, IPAs, it's a fantastic grain. It's got a great colour, great flavour, and it works well by itself. You don't have to add anything to it if you don't want to. Really tremendous grain for smash beers. Okay, for grain storage, after I open a bag of grain or I get my other grains, these I use either the white 20 litre buckets or I use these fellas. They're a 35 litre storage barrel, but they'll hold about 18 to 20 kilo of grain. And of course I bought them from the Big Green Shed, Bunnings. So, and I think they're about 35 bucks. I've got about 4 or 5 of them, and they seal really well. They keep the vermin out and they do the job. So after we weigh the grain out using a set of scales I purchased from eBay, they're pretty good scales. It's over to the mill, and the mill is a Mill Master double fluted gear driven. It's an Australian product. It's not cheap. Buy once, hurt once. Fantastic mill. Gives a good crush, and it doesn't rip the husk apart like some of the honeycomb style mills do. And then that is driven off a Keg King mill motor and switch. Keeps it around that 180 RPM. And the coupling that I use, I had to go from 13mm to 1/2 inch, and the only way I could purchase that was eBay, so that's an eBay purchase. The mill's purchased from Keg King, and it came with the switch. So it's a good unit, gives me good service, and I've just got it on a cabinet that I built for a bit of tidiness. I just put a bucket underneath of it, and goes good. Okay, so over there what we're looking at is my single brew units. They're both from Keg King Australia. They're both Guten units. The smaller unit is a Guten 40. It was my first ever all grain unit, and I purchased that when they first come into Australia, when they were first available. I've had absolute zero problems with it. It took a while, I will admit it took a while to learn the programming, but I have about 5 or 6 programs, different brew programs in that one now, so it works well. Okay, a bit of a look at the second unit there now. It's also a Keg King gluten unit, and it's a 70 litre unit. I did do an unboxing of this guy. So while the smaller unit runs off a 10 amp power point, the 70 litre the bigger system needs a 15 amp power point. But most of the bigger units do, the Brewzillas, I'm not sure about Grainfather or anything else, but I know they do. So it has a tap outlet, the same. Programming is exactly the same as the gluten 40, so it's only a matter of downloading the PDF from the Keg King website, and it's quite easy to print it out and understand it. There next to it you see my stainless steel stirring paddle. I very rarely use a top plate anymore when I brew, because I just stir the wort, and I stir it a lot. And the beauty of the 70 litre system is it has a measurement glass on the side, and it's not too bad neither. It's one litre out, so 20 litres is 19 litres, and after and it's just 1 litre out, so it works good. Stainless steel lid, and because you can buy, I think you can buy distilling parts for it. Whereas the 40 litre unit has a glass lid. So when I brew I normally brew 42 litre batches in the 70. I use the 40 litre as a HLT, and then I just pump it out for my sparge. I brew 4 litres per kilo of grain in the big unit when I do a double batch, and in the gluten 40, when I'm only doing a 23 litre batch, I brew at 3 litres per kilo. And when I use the 40 litre, I have a Grainfather urn that I use for the HLT, and it holds about 16 litres, so it's fine. So they're my brewing units, and they do a great job. I would recommend the gluten system to anyone without hesitation. Okay, hop additions and additions to the malt. I have a Mangrove Jack hop spider, and then I have a hop spider that come with the gluten system. Now the hop spider that come with the gluten system is extremely fine. I still find if you jiggle things around, I still think the hop gets out, and the Mangrove Jack one is a lot more coarse. So as you can see right through the Mangrove Jack, whereas you can't see through the one that came with the gluten. Now I don't use a hop spider much of the time, if at all now, because I use a false bottom. And the false bottom and a whirlpool arm does a pretty good job. You do still get a bit of residue, but the yeast eats it up, so I'm not too worried about it. So when the brew's finished, to get it out, I go through a counterflow chiller. It's a homemade counterflow chiller. It's 30 metres of 1/2 inch copper pipe, which I just simply bent around a keg, laid it out and bent it around a keg, And then I got some 20mm or 21mm hose and put it around the copper. I haven't spaced it out or anything, I haven't worried about that, and it works quite well. It's pretty efficient. I know it looks a bit untidier than a production model. And then I just got some fittings. So as you can see there, all I've done is I have a large hose connector which actually clamped onto the copper pipe the hose very well. Then a fitting into a 20mm stainless steel fitting that I purchased from Keg King, and then I've got a couple of reducers on it. So I pump out of the gluten into that, so that's why I've got nothing on one end. I just use the silicone hose from the gluten. Put it on there, pump it out, run a bit of water through, down I go. Same on the other end, just a couple of fittings and a reducer fitting. And my temperature gauge. So I get a bit of an idea of what the temperature is coming out. Now that gauge, it's only the short 3-inch gauge. So it doesn't get in there all the way, but it's about 1 or 2 degrees high. And then I'll pump straight into the fermenter. So here at Taree, I mean, I go fairly well. I get it straight into the fermenter from that. There's a unit that come with the gluten. This one come with the gluten 40. You just get hose connectors and you run your this is an immersion chiller, stainless steel, and you run your cold water through that, put that in the brew and run through that. Now what I do in summer, I'll clean that right out. I normally use the PBW or the Atomic 15 solution, and I really flush that out, and I'll actually sit that in ice and run the wort through that after it comes out of the counterflow chiller. But I think next year what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to run the cold water through that before it hits the immersion chiller and see how it goes. But anyway, that's something I'll experiment with. Okay, so before we get on to my fermenters, I'll just go through quickly. Cleanliness is extremely important to brewing, the brew process. Cleanliness and sanitisation. I can't stress enough. Even if you're not sure something's sanitised, sanitise it. If you don't think it's clean, clean it. If you haven't used your brewing equipment for a month or a couple of months, run a bit of water through it, heat it up to 80+ degrees and heat it up and just pump it out and get rid of it. Just the cleaner it is, the better the beer you're going to make. So my vessels, I find the barkeeper's friend extremely useful. And after a brew, if I've got a bit of burn on where the elements are down the bottom, you just sprinkle a bit of this on, leave it for a couple of minutes. Get one of those sponges that don't leave scratches, or even a cloth, and the barkeeper's friend will remove it. The barkeeper's friend, if you get a stainless steel unit and you want to do pacification on it, it will also pacify it to a degree. It won't do as good a job as the factory, but it will pacify it. So we move on from that, and this is a Keg King product. As I say, I buy a lot of Keg King product. It's a Keg King cleaner, Atomic 15. I find it great for general brew cleaning, brew house cleaning. I clean my lines out with it. It's a mixture of powders that have been put together. Very useful product. Clean your beer lines out with it. Clean your bottles, wash your kegs, everything. Really good product. Then the products next to it are just, I use Digger's surface cleaner, and I do exactly what it says. I just clean surfaces, clean my stainless steel with it, just give things a general wipe down. I wipe down my brewing fridge before I put the fermenter in it before brewing. It just gives it a surface spray, keep the mould down. And then next to it at the moment I'm using a Morgan's Low Suds sanitizer. That was bought from the local brew shop down here at Taree. He's very good. I really do try to use him when I can, and he's pretty good on product. But he doesn't sell a lot of the Keg King range, and I must admit I'm a fan of Keg King. But I do buy a lot of stuff off him. I get my CO2 cylinders regassed from him. I use him as much as I can for what I can. And then next to that is just, that's my sanitizer spray bottle, and it's just a weed sprayer from, you pump it for a bit of pressure. That's from the big green shed out at Bunnings, and I just make up some. I've got a 15 litre container that I actually make my sanitizer in. I use a lot of it. You can't over sanitize, I can't stress that enough. So thanks for watching, guys. That is what I use to brew my beer. There'll be a follow-up video on fermentation, and maybe one after that on other bits and pieces that I have and use. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get something out of it. Leave any questions down below, and as I will reiterate at the end of the video, and as you would have seen, the majority of my gear is bought from Keg King at kegking.com.au, and the reason being that I've never had any problems with Keg King. Any issue I've had has been easily sorted, and they've been few and far between. So why change retailers when you get a retailer that you get what you want off, you get good equipment, and the other person, the other business that gets most of my business, of course, is Steve at thebrewman.com.au. Really good fellow to deal with. So Steve is the supplier of the majority of my grain, my hops, my yeast, my salts, and the bonus to thebrewman.com.au is I can actually go and pick stuff up. He's only an hour and a half down the road. So thank you to all businesses that I use, and the ones mentioned: Water Filters Australia, Keg King, The Brewman, iBrew. Thank you. It's Neil from Magpie Brewing saying I'll see you when we do the fermentation equipment.